Hi, it's Marvin Music with MedicareSchool.com, and I'm joined with Stephen Stricklin, the president of Wise Wealth, the firm that we actually partner with to make sure that our clients have a wonderful financial plan for their retirement years. Steve, I've heard you say this, and that is that retirement is one of those things in life that you can't do over.
Right.
Yeah, and sad to say, sometimes people make mistakes that they really can never recover from, and we don't want that to happen for sure.
Right.
Today, he's going to address what we call the two big mistakes that people often make. So, Steve, explain that so people don't make these mistakes.
Appreciate it, Marvin. And it's so true. We like to tell people that you get one chance to retire, but we help people retire every single day. So we're dealing with people that are before retirement. We're dealing with people that are getting ready to retire. We're dealing with people that are in retirement. It's just all that we do at our firm. So we've seen a lot of things over the years to help people get ready for retirement. You're in the critical 15. Mistakes can't be made because we don't have time to recover. And so really two of the biggest mistakes that we see that people make when it comes to retirement income planning has to do with the stock market. It has to do with stock market volatility. And the first one is what I like to call the average versus the actual rate of return. And this is going to be critical. A lot of times we talk to everybody about a paradigm shift, and this is one of the paradigm shifts that people have to have. It's a change in the way you think about these things. So what I mean by that is sometimes you'll see a investment portfolio, you'll see a mutual fund prospectus, and it'll say the average annual rate of return in this portfolio is 6% per year. And sometimes people look at that and they assume that that means that they can base their entire retirement assumptions on this average annual rate of return. But here's the problem. When you're dealing with the stock market and you're talking about an average annual rate of return, you're talking about something that goes up in value and down in value. And the reality is simply this, that if you have an investment portfolio, if you have a list of returns that involves any negative returns, the average annual rate of return and the actual rate of return are never the same. So I'm just going to give you all just two examples today. So let's just say you had a portfolio that went up 30% one year and it went down 20% the next year. Over that 2-year period, you had a 10% rate of return over that 2-year period of time. The average rate of return for that 2-year period of time would be 5% per year. That's the average annual rate of return. But if you had a portfolio, you started with $1,000 and that $1,000 earned 30% in year one, you would have $1,300 in that portfolio. But if $1,300 loses 20% next year, you're going to lose $260. The portfolio balance after 2 years is going to be $1,040 at the end of 2 years. That equals a 4% total return, and that equals an average of 2% per year. But if you had a mutual fund portfolio, they would say it was up 30% one year, down 20% year the next. You got 10%, the average is 5%. And the reality is that is the average. But if you were invested in that portfolio, you would not have gotten 10%. You would not have averaged 5%. You would have averaged 2%. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand, how is that possible? The reason that is because anytime there's a negative number added into the mix, the average is not the same as the real. But when you're looking at a portfolio, a lot of times, advisors will show someone a portfolio that has a 40-year history, and they'll say the average rate of return in this portfolio has been 6% per year. And it's not a lie. This is not a lie. This is the average rate of return. Plus 30, minus 20 over a 2-year period of time. That is the average. So it's not true. They don't know when you got in, when you got out. So they only advertise the average. But I need a light bulb to go off in everyone's mind from this day forward. Anytime you hear the word average rate of return, you need to realize that's not the same as the real. I'm going to get to why that's important in just a minute. Let me just give you one more example. If I have a return that was minus 10% one year, plus 20% in year two, we've almost have the same scenario. At the end of 2 years, you have a plus 10% return. The average is 5%. But how many of you believe that your real return is not going to be 5%? So I have a portfolio that goes down 10%. I'm going to start with $1,000 again. I'm going to have $900 after year one. 900 goes up by 20%. I'm going to add $180 to this at the end of 2 years. I have $1,080. That's not bad, but that is a 8% return, and my average equals 4. Marvin, I could do this all day long. The point is, anytime you have a negative return added into the mix, the average rate of return is never going to be the same as the actual rate of return. And you may be saying, why is that important? That's important simply because most people go into retirement and they're basing their entire retirement income on an average annual rate of return. They're saying something like this, and a lot of times advisors will say something like this: hey, here's a portfolio that's been around for 40 years. The average annual rate of return in this portfolio has been 6% a year. You're probably not going to live 40 years in retirement, are you? This portfolio has been around longer than you're going to live in retirement. It's been through a lot of ups and downs. It's averaged 6% a year. You, Mr. and Mrs. Client, if you only need to pull out 5% per year, you probably, or you should not run out of money in retirement. If I said to you, here's a portfolio that averages 6 and you withdraw 5, you should not run out of money in retirement. That sounds true, but in reality, it is very possible to average 6, withdraw 5, and run out of money in retirement. Why is that true? That's true because, first of all, the average is not the same as the actual rate of return. That's one of the biggest mistakes people make, basing their entire retirement dreams on an average rate of return. The other one is this one, and I'm just going to say over here, it's what we call the sequence of returns, the sequence of returns risk, because the other thing that matters to people is not only just making an assumption of the average, it's the order that the returns comes in. So if I'm in a portfolio that I'm withdrawing 5% per year, let's just say that I have a portfolio of $1 million. And in year 1, the stock market loses 20%, the S&P is down, but I needed $50,000 a year of income. I'm going to pull out 5%. So at the end of year 1, I'm going to have $750,000. I need $50,000 a year. Now all of a sudden in year number 2, instead of starting with $1 million and a 5% withdrawal rate, may feel like, you know what, I think that's sustainable. I may be able to do that. All of a sudden in year number 2, I still need $50,000 a year. But $50,000 and $750,000 is no longer a 5% withdrawal rate. That's closer to a 6 or 7% withdrawal rate. So all of a sudden I need 6.5%. But what if the market hasn't come back yet? And in fact, it's down 10%. And we could just keep going down this list. Now all of a sudden I only have, let's say, $600,000. I'm 2 years into retirement. I need $50,000 a year. I had $1 million 2 years ago. 100% of this was subject to market risk. And Marvin, this is not a stretch. Even in with a lot of bonds, even in a stock bond portfolio, to lose 20% these days is not that hard. To lose 10% is not that much out of the question. So someone 2 years in retirement simply because there were negative returns early. Now again, in year 3, I need $50,000 a year. Now all of a sudden, this is a 9% withdrawal rate. That is not sustainable. Now again, if I reverse this and you had a plus 20% in year 1 and a plus 10% in year 2, this would look a lot better. And the reality is that's a possibility too. The reality is that nobody knows the day they retire what the order the returns are going to come in. All I'm saying to everybody is it makes a dramatic impact on your ability to have enough income in retirement. It could very well be positive your first few years. If it is, might not run out of money. If it's negative the first couple of years, the chances are you probably will run out of money in retirement. So the point is this. The point of this video today is there's 2 big mistakes. And I'll admit to you, it took me a long time being in the industry to understand these 2 concepts. So there's a lot of very good financial advisors out there that simply just say, here's a portfolio that averages 6, you need to pull out 5, you shouldn't run out of money in retirement. I'm here to tell you today that's a big risk and why we do planning. So there is a plan. You can put together a plan that says, I'm not going to base it on the average rates of return. Since I don't know the order the returns are going to come in the day I retire, I'm going to make sure that my plan addresses this potential so that doesn't happen. And I wouldn't tell you all about this risk if there was not a way to deal with it. And there is a way to deal with sequence of returns. And it's something that you can eliminate that risk, take it off the table so you don't have to worry about it in retirement.
Yeah, very good, Steve.
Yep.
You know what's interesting about this? The whole sequence of returns, people don't deal with this when they're accumulating and saving for retirement.
Yes.
So there does have to be a shift, and we really do have to pay attention. As I hear you talk about this, this is really what causes people sometimes to have to go back to work.
That's right.
They didn't prepare for this properly, got to return to work because they spent down that money too quickly.
It's one of those things that no one hears about this. No one's talking about average versus actual rate of return. No one's talking about sequence of returns. Like you just mentioned, it only impacts you during this phase of investing, but it's something that really has to be talked about and addressed.
All right, very good. Well, hey, we appreciate so much you sharing this with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.